NBA Chaser Fade time. So you know the drill. Agree or disagree with the following DFS plays or bets for tonight's game 2 between the Clippers and Suns. So guys, 2 most expensive players to captain are Paul George at $12K and Devin Booker at $11,800. So I need you to chase one and fade the other tonight. Kenny, who are you going to go with?
Yeah, it's a tough decision because both of these guys were really on their game in game 1. But if I have to pick one guy that I'm going to lead my lineup with, it's going to be Paul George. I just can't get over the consistency in the usage rate department. It's been 5 games in a row now, 34% or more, or 32% or more, I should say. But really just numbers that you want to see, consistent numbers. He's the safer play of the 2 captains. I think Devin Booker probably has the higher upside, as he showed you in game 1. But look, Paul George is having his Jimmy Butler postseason right now. Paul George is doing something pretty great. He's putting to shame all the people that doubted him. I was one of those people. And, you know, you just have to admire the job that he's done without Kawhi Leonard. He is the guy taking all the shots. He's scored 34 or more points in 2 straight games. 4 of the last 5, he scored 30 points. So he's just going to be the volume shooter here, the volume scorer. And I think that he's the safer of the 2 options. And, you know, yeah, I love that discount.
Nick, Paul George or D-Book, who are you going with?
I'm going to go the other way here. And Kenny kind of alluded to it. I think Devin Booker maybe has slightly higher upside in this matchup. And part of it is the fact that we don't have Chris Paul. I'm not expecting another 40-point triple-double, certainly. But I think the arrival of Chris Paul has kind of made us forget a little bit of how good of a playmaker Devin Booker had shown that he could be over these last 2 seasons. I mean, before Paul arrived, he was at 6.5 and 6.8 assists per game over the previous 2 seasons. So he's not just a guy who could fill it up from the mid-range and fill it up from 3. I mean, he could get you 6+ assists per game when he's essentially acting as the primary playmaker. And that's what we saw in game 1. It was kind of a split between he and Cam Payne. Obviously, with Paul out again, I think we see something similar. So I think we see maybe a decrease in Booker's scoring, but, you know, maybe he doesn't get to 10, 11 assists, but I think 7, 8, 9 is very much possible. You know, he had 5+ assists 4 times in round 1 against the Lakers. The Denver series, a little bit tougher to evaluate because some of those were blowouts. But, man, without Chris Paul in the lineup, I think we see another 40+ minute night from Devin Booker. And if everything's running through him, he's just going to have a ton of opportunities to rack up fantasy stats.
All right, Ryan, we got 1 for Paul George, 1 for D-Book. Where are you going?
Yeah, this one was hard. And despite my love for the Suns, I'm chasing Paul George tonight. I think the urgency is higher. And outside, I would think that the Devin Booker 40, 13, and 10 game that he just had was his best performance of his entire career, more than the 70-point game. This is a meaningful, his first Western Conference Finals game ever, and he carries the team to a win, where the other one was they were like 20-win team in a meaningless regular season game. So I don't know if Booker repeats that performance, but the urgency is higher for the Clippers. I think that the Clippers, both series previously, have made really good adjustments, and that's what their style of play has been. So I think they make adjustments tonight and not allow a guy to have 40, 13, and 10 on them. So I think Paul George, I'm chasing here.
All right, who are you chasing for some value in this showdown contest, Nick?
I'll throw out a few names. Cam Johnson at 5,400. You know, the upside hasn't necessarily been there for him throughout the playoffs, but his 12 points in game 1 were his most in any game this postseason. Certainly a guy who on any night, if the shots are there, is capable of knocking down 4 or 5 3-pointers. So he's someone I do like throwing in there just because I think there is some of that upside for scoring. Torrey Craig at 3,400. He had 18 DraftKings points in just 15 minutes in game 1. I think they need Torrey Craig out there for defensive purposes. So I wouldn't be surprised, I should say, if he remains an integral part of the rotation in this series. And then I think you have to consider Rajon Rondo. His role has been so up and down really since joining the Clippers, but he's at $2,600. He played 22 minutes in game 1, had 25 DraftKings points. Wasn't great for them down the stretch. You know, it wouldn't be a surprise if Ty Lue yanks back his minutes a little bit tonight, but at this price, I think he's worth the reward.
All right, what do we think here, Ryan? Chasing for some value, who's it going to be?
I like what Boogie has to offer right now. $2,000. Last game, he only played 13 minutes, but 19 fantasy points. When he was in the first half, things were working. The Clippers were playing well. The only problem is the Clippers have played small, and they've had a lot of success going small. They play Batum and Morris at the 4 and 5. So Boogie really has to capitalize when he's in there. But for $2,000, I like that risk.
Move move on. Let's talk about Phoenix being favored by 5.5. Chase or fade that they cover, Ryan. You did say you think the Clippers are going to make some adjustments and corrections, so maybe you're fading the Suns.
I wish I could. I'm chasing the Suns. I think the Suns win tonight by 7 or 8 points, but I do think that the Clippers make adjustments just to no avail. The Phoenix Suns have won 8 straight big playoff games. They are playing the best basketball in the entire world right now. On paper, the Bucks might look to have a better roster, but nobody is playing better than the Suns. The Clippers like to lose the first 2 games in this series, though. We know that. The last 2, they've done that. So that's a good mix for the Suns winning tonight.
All right, Kenny, you seem to be back. So we're talking now about Phoenix being favored by 5.5. Are you going to chase or fade that they cover? They've been nearly unbeatable at home. I mean, they've won 18 of their last 20.
Yeah, I'm really happy that I'm back for this question because I'm really mad that the Clippers, they were not expected to win game 1. They should not have won game 1, and nearly they did. They led in the third quarter. This was a 2-point game in the final minute. And now the Clippers are bigger underdogs, Jessie. That's just outrageous to me. And when you look at the Phoenix Suns, they had the worst defensive performance that they had all postseason without Chris Paul, 121.3 points per 100 possessions. That is definitely because of Chris Paul being out. And I don't care what you want to say about, how exciting the Phoenix Suns are at home. And, they hit a lot of threes. The Clippers hit more threes. I think that the Clippers obviously are just as talented in that department, and they'll continue to score the basketball on the Suns. And as we saw in that Utah series, what did the Clippers do? They weathered the storm early. Utah had their good shooting nights. They had their big nights shooting the basketball. But every time the Clippers were there to answer, every time the Clippers were there, especially late in the series, they kind of just weathered that early storm, same thing with the Mavericks. And then their consistency on the offensive end and, frankly, their ability to force turnovers really got them to where they needed to be. So I do think that this is too big of a line. I think the Clippers win this game outright. And I think that people stop disrespecting Ty Lue because the man makes great adjustments.
Wow. Strong words from Kenny. Nick, where do you sit on this one?
I'm as indecisive, I think, as Ryan was about this one. I feel like I have to chase Phoenix, and I'm seeing this line down to 5. So there's a little bit of momentum maybe in the Kenny Ducey camp toward the LA Clippers tonight. I'm just having a hard time buying into this Clippers team, even though they've played 3 really good games. One of those on Sunday resulted in a loss. They've played 3 really good games without Kawhi Leonard, but I just can't get over the fact that they don't have Kawhi Leonard. And I know you take Chris Paul away from the Phoenix Suns, and in some ways that kind of evens things out. But it does feel like the Clippers have been playing a little bit, over their skis these last few games. They hit 23-pointers in game 1. They outscore Phoenix by 24 points from beyond the line. The Suns only took 9 free throws in that game. The Clippers didn't turn the ball over much at all. Like, things seem to be going a little too right, I guess, in some ways for the Clippers. And I wouldn't be surprised if that swings back the other way, especially the shooting a little bit in game 2. Obviously, if Chris Paul was suiting up for Phoenix, I would feel really good about the Suns jumping up 2-0 at home. That's really the factor that makes this such a difficult call. But, the Clippers have some things to figure out. The center rotation is kind of a mess right now. They've had some success going small, but they still want to use Zubac. We saw Cousins in game 1. There's just a lot of moving pieces, and I'm expecting some pretty major regression, I think, in terms of 3-point shooting. So for me, that's the difference that swings it in favor of the Suns. So I'll take them to cover that 5-point spread.
Yeah, Nick, you mentioned that the line's been changing a little. It opened at -6.5. Now it's down to -5. So, yeah, it is moving. But let's move on to the game total, guys. So are we going to chase or fade that the game goes over 224.5? Now, the total's gone over in 6 of the last 9 Clippers games, and game 1 easily went over in Phoenix's 120-114 win. So, Kenny, what do you think?
Yeah, I like the over here. I think that, to Nick's point, not to go back to the last question, but I think a lot has gone right for the Suns as well. And when you think about what's happening, look, Chris Paul has been the key to slowing the pace down to a grinding halt in these games for the Phoenix Suns. That was their identity all season long. They played defense and they played slow, grinded out games. Chris Paul just took a painstaking amount of time on the offensive end to find the right shot. And they don't have him there. And you see the pace numbers, the on-off splits. They are definitely playing faster without Chris Paul. They're definitely playing worse defense without Chris Paul. And maybe the Clippers won't shoot 42% from 3, but this is a talented 3-point shooting team. They have a scorer in Paul George that's been able to get them timely hoops. And I just think that, again, this is a game where, both teams are going to be pretty evenly matched. I think that the nature of a close game actually gets us a higher scoring game in this case because the pace is going to be the way it is. So I do think that this over is a pretty good bet. I'm fading the Phoenix Suns defense here.
What's a prop bet that you're chasing, Nick? We'll go to you first in case you decide to freeze.
Okay, I'll try to get this in quick. I like Terrence Mann over 1.5 threes. That's at minus 106. I think a lot of people were expecting a big game one out of Terrence Mann after what we saw from him in game 6. That was a pretty big letdown. I think he only took 4 shots, didn't play as many minutes as some people thought. I do think we see a better effort from Terrence Mann. Obviously, close to a must-win game, I think, for the Clippers, given that CP is likely back for game 3. And then I like Devin Booker over 44.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. I think he probably like decreases slightly in all of those categories relative to game 1. But I think 44.5 is still a pretty friendly number. I mean, you could very easily go for 35 points in this game, and then you need, something like 5 rebounds, 5 assists to hit the over there, which seems, pretty doable. So those are the two that I'm keeping my eye on tonight.
All right, clearly Zoom is having some issues. Ryan, you're back though. So what's a prop bet that you're chasing?
Yeah, I'm with Nick. I love that line. I think Booker significantly gets less in all 3 than game 1, but he's their entire team without Chris Paul right now offensively. So I like him to go over there.
All right, Kenny, talk to me about a prop bet that you're chasing.
Yeah, this is outrageous that Nick just had the same prop bet as me, because I figured that this was such an obscure one that no one would take it. But yes, Terrence Mann at minus 106 to have more than 1.5 threes. Look, this is not a case of a fluke anymore with Terrence Mann. Obviously he's not going to hit 7 threes tonight, right? But he's a guy that they're looking at to fill the void of Kawhi Leonard at small forward. And I know that Marcus Morris is on his way back, but look, he's played incredibly well here. And when you look at the way that this, am I frozen? No, I'm back.
No, you're
frozen on my screen. So when you look at the way that this Clippers team stacks up, though, they're really still missing a 5th guy, right? You have 4 pretty good guys in Batum, Morris, Paul George, and Reggie Jackson, and then they're kind of trying to figure out that 5th guy. Man is that 5th guy, and I think he's proven that over the last 5 games, where he's averaged 14 points and 4 3-point attempts, 2 threes on him. So yeah, I like multiple threes here.